Public notice of this meeting pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Act has been given by the Board Secretary on August 3rd, 2022 in the following manner. Posted notice on the school bulletin board at the administration building, transmitted to the Courier Post, Philadelphia Inquirer, and the clerk of Cherry Hill Township. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Mrs. Sugars, would you please call roll?
Mrs. Arroyo, Mrs. Stratton, Mrs. Fleischer. Here. Mr. Mayor.
Here.
Dr. Rude.
Here.
Ms. Stern. Mrs. Tong.
Here.
Mr. Avadia.
Here. All right. I would like to read a resolution. And this resolution is appointing member to fill board vacancy. And that member, after a field of 37 wonderful candidates, we found this wonderful candidate who will be our person, Mrs. Gina Winters. Mrs. Gina Winters, will you stand, please? Whereas Board of Education member Kimberly Friedel resigned her seat on the Cherry Hill Board of Education effective July 1st, 2022. And whereas the board conducted a thorough process in accordance with its policy 0143 to seek candidates for the vacant position and to identify an individual to fill the position through the board's next organization meeting in January 2023. And whereas after careful consideration of the candidates, the board deems it appropriate to appoint Gina Winters at this time to fill the vacancy created by Kimberly Friedel's resignation. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Cherry Hill Board of Education hereby appoints Gina Winters, subject to a successful completion of a criminal background check, as a member of the Cherry Hill Board of Education to fill the vacancy created by the resignation of Kimberly Friedel, effective until the board's next organization meeting in January 2023. The board will be swearing in Ms. Winters upon the successful completion of a criminal background check. And once again, congratulations to. Oh, okay. And so I'm moving that and I need a second, or I'd like it one. Mrs. Fleischer, and everyone who thinks that's a good idea, raise your hand. Okay. All right. That's a quorum. The motion therefore carries. Congratulations, Ms. Winters. We look forward very soon to seeing you up here. Okay. That, I want to say there's no board recognition, but it feels like that was a board recognition. So anyway, there are no additional board recognitions, and that will move us along to an update on special education family meetings, and we'll turn it over to Dr. Meloche.
Thank you, Mr. Avadia. Let me just get set here so I can share this presentation. All right. So thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Avadia. We've talked over the last number of months about an activity in which we engaged back in the spring. For a number of years now, we've taken the opportunity, or I've taken the opportunity administratively to meet with families and different families in Cherry Hill to talk about their experiences in the school district. I've met with brand new families to Cherry Hill. I've met with families of students of color. We just try to get a well-rounded perspective on what the families have experienced, what it's like for them, why they came to Cherry Hill, and what it is that we can do better. So back in the spring of 2021, when I shared out the information with the board members were very interested at that time of participating in those discussions, because it is such a unique experience to be able to sit down with the family, whether it's in the office or in their dining room or to do it online, but to hear that very direct and very personal experience about what it has been like for them and for their children while they've been in the school district of Cherry Hill. So this year we focused on families of students with an IEP or a 504 classified students in the district. The goal that we had was to meet with at least 20 families and have board members participate with me. We actually met with 21 families at the time. So I just want to report out on what we saw and what we found as we went through in these discussions. So first, I used this this graphic is one that Dr. Mahan and Mr. Goldthorpe have shared with us. They're funnel about what we do with the information, how we start in the very broad with the district mission statement, our student wellness goal, major activities. Major activity in this instance was the parent meetings, and ultimately to find out what the experience was for our students. So just to kind of set the foundation for where we are. The wording that actually took place and it was included in the district goals for 2021, 2022 was this major activity was assess and support populations with special needs or state identified populations. And we identified special needs as IEP 504 ELL or state identified as homeless, low income, LGBTQIA+, and home languages. And then the indicator of success, this is what the activity was that we actually did. Superintendent and board members will meet with at least 20 families of students with identified special needs or state identified special populations. So the process, what did we actually do? So we narrowed it down even broader or even more focused from what the original goal statement was, just to focus on students who had an IEP or a 504. So we went about this process that late in the winter of 2022. So after the first of the year of 2022, families are nominated by building principals and by folks who work in the Office of Special Education with a suggestion of, Joe, you and one of the board members should really meet with this family. You should really hear about what their experience is. And these were certainly not all families that we were looking to give a glowing review about how great, and then the sunshine and roses that Cherry Hill is, but people that were going to give a very authentic perspective about what their experience has been. So 38 families were identified and 38 families were invited via email and regular mail to participate in one of these meetings to discuss their experiences and talk about what it was like for their child. Families from all 19 schools were contacted. There were 11 different classifications that were represented, children with different classifications in their IEP. Families and children are identified as African-American, Asian, Hispanic, Latino, mixed race, and white. And English was not the first language for all of the families and children with whom we met and with all the families that we contacted. Ultimately, meetings were scheduled with the families, some that took place in person in my office, some that took place in family homes, some that took place via Zoom, and some that were just on a traditional telephone. So we used all the different media that we possibly had available to us to have these meetings. And then the meetings lasted from 30 minutes to a little bit more than 60 minutes or a little bit more than an hour, depending upon the discussion, depending upon some of the families that we met with. Multiple family members participated, including some of our students, which was kind of fascinating as well. This is just a list of the classification categories for special education. This is what we use. These are what we share at the state level in terms of how children are classified, where those numbers are, and goes as a representative list for the children in our district. And then these are the students that we met with. I just did a list of where the students attend school and their classification. You can see the different schools. Not all of the 19 schools were represented in the individual meetings. All 19 schools were represented in the families that we contacted, but not all were represented in the individual meetings. But we believe that we had a relatively well-represented group of children in the district with the 21 families with whom we met. So this is Malberg, or at the time it was Barclay, the Early Childhood Center, and the rest of the elementary schools. and then the secondary schools. And then what did the meetings actually look like? So Mrs. Cohen, my administrative assistant, who was the primary contact through all of us, or through all of this, we sat down ahead of time, scheduled, the meetings were scheduled, the location, names, the parents, guardians, the children. And again, some families have more than one child with an IEP or 504, who they discussed during the meetings. Some families have other children who are enrolled in the district without an IEP or a 504, who they also discussed, which again, interesting and unique perspective with the different families. Then we identified the program in which the children were enrolled. We asked all the families the same 5 questions. I led the questioning. The board members, when board members were participatory, they took notes. They had a copy of the sheet. They took notes as well. But these were the 5 questions. How long has your child or children been enrolled in the district? Describe the programming supports your child or children receive. Share your experience in acquiring and accessing services for your children, both initially and then yearly, depending upon the age of their child, where they are. Do you have any suggestions for the district as we move forward? And is there anything else that you would like to share? So 5 open-ended questions, very straightforward to look at. And then we took notes. Board members took notes. Board members shared their notes. I went through all the notes that I took as well. We broke all the information down and then came up with these highlights, of either things that were identified more than once or that thematically we believed were the strongest statements that came through. So the easiest one to answer was, how long has your child or children been enrolled in the school district? And honestly, we had a range of just a few months. We met with family who came to the district after the first of the year, to families who had been in the district at that point for more than 15 years. So children who were enrolled in the district as 3-year-olds that came out of early intervention, and then for the past 15 years had been in the district. And then more than 80% of the families with whom we met had more than one child enrolled in the school district, which I thought was an interesting identifier as well. And then the types of programming supports that your children receive. So in this list did not include the program because we already listed that they are enrolled, whether it's autistic support or multiply disabled, but the additional supports or things that their child receives. So everything from the 3 most common therapies that children receive, which are occupational therapy, physical therapy, and speech therapy. Also added in there assistive technology, which came up quite frequently. Tutoring, some that had a one-to-one educational assistant, some who had access to an educational assistant in a classroom. ESY, which is the extended school year. Different forms of extra help that are provided to the children in terms of services. Special classes, again, and the identifier, special classes for the children to attend. Job sampling, which takes place at the high school level, part of the program that exists at High School West. Field trips, which is an interesting one that came up. And then I included in here because some field trips that were very specialized, depending upon the program in which the children were enrolled, and the program that they were here in school, beyond what would be the normal scope or beyond what would be the day-to-day scope of a child who did not have an IEP. Effective School Solutions and the wraparound program, again, specialized program that exists at Bret Harte, at Rosa, at High School East, West, and the alternative high school program. Unified Sports Program, which has been up and running for a number of years, right now exists at High School West. Currently, we have Unified Bowling and Unified Track, and these are interscholastic athletic teams that involve both children with IEPs and children without IEPs. And then another one that came up a number of times was door-to-door transportation or the specialized transportation. Question number 3 was, share your experience in acquiring and accessing services for your children. We spent a lot of time in the meetings on question number 3. What came up a number of times, literally the initial response from families was, it's been a fight, to acquire or to access services. There were families that talked about the experience was a positive one, that they felt supported. Folks that talked about the initial testing process is difficult. Pandemic created new challenges where disruption of services came up quite frequently and certainly was very timely based on the last couple of years. Lack of continuity for staff can be hard for children. This is one that, with some of the families dug a little bit deeper into about what did you mean by staff? Was it a classroom teacher? Was it a therapist? Was it a case manager? And really kind of went, broadly on across the realm of what that meant. What some folks believe, should be the continuity. A lot of the things that came up in a number of the questions dealt with communication, about the fact that open communication is a necessity. When it's been there, the process has been great. Without it, the process has been trying. And some of those, everybody's, shared very personal stories and very personal family experiences about that. Communication always came back as a key factor and a key item. As a board and as a district, we talk about communication a lot. It traditionally is one of the goals that we focus on. And we know that effective communication, what it means to be effective with a family, certainly is a key piece here with children with IEPs. Families talked about feeling like they're a part of the team and making decisions for the child. Again, going back to that, initial services, very confused during the first year. The classification process is one that is not necessarily known for families, unless they've had that experience or have talked to people with the experience. Number of the families talked about feeling more comfortable as the child progressed through school. That as they became more familiar with the process of the early development of an IEP, the communication with the case manager, identification of the services, that they have felt more comfortable. One mother was adamant that I make sure that I share that the process here was dramatically easier than it was in the previous district where she was with her child. And could we, if she said it once, she said it 5 or 6 times, could we contact, I kept naming the other district, could we go there and provide service to the district so they would know how to do this? I said, well, certainly we can offer our services, but we're good. Families talked about feeling heard in the IEP meetings. Families talked about that the experience has felt differently at the different levels, elementary school to middle school to high school. And again, interesting and correlative discussions to have about, is that because they felt more comfortable in the process? Is that because their child, was, in terms of maturation and the comfortability in the levels and what went on? Again, took a couple of years to feel comfortable being part of the process. We heard from many families that Barkley or now as Malberg was great. What a great experience for families to transition in, especially families that were transitioning out of early intervention, so that at 3 years old, they were right and ready to go to transition into the early childhood center. Some families talked about needing, and desiring more clarity about where programs are offered and why they are offered in different buildings, at each of the levels, elementary and middle school, and what the implications are for school attendance. This came up more so with families of children who were classified, after the child was in 2nd grade or 3rd grade or 4th grade, after initially starting at a school. And then a request about preparing students to participate in the IEP meetings when they are of age. That the parents, as they feel more participatory and feel that they have a stronger voice, is there something we can do as a school and as a district to help children be more prepared to participate when they are of age? And then suggestions. This is probably where we got the most. And honestly, I had a number of families that contacted me afterwards that sent follow-up emails. One parent, when she came in to meet with us, she had a typed out sheet to begin with, which was fantastic. She said, I just have to let you know, we talked about it as a family at home. She came in here and met in the office with us. I want to make sure I cover everything. So I typed notes up. Can I give this to you? I'm like, absolutely. But we did have parents that followed up via email as well. So more information about transition to college. Can we maintain case managers by level? Is there a way to say that a child will have the same case manager in elementary school, the same case manager in middle school, and the same case manager in high school? More communication about what happens in related services. By related services, OT, PT, speech, if there are assistive technology meetings. So, is there a way to get more details? Parents that want to practice on skills at home or work on those things. Is there a way that there is a standard for that and the expectation that comes out? Again, same, more communication for related services providers, teachers. Can we expand athletic and extracurricular activities to be more inclusive? And what does that look like? Is there a way to have more or have, more activities at the elementary level to expand what exists in the middle school and at the high school? More case manager student interaction before and after transitions, and really took this, the focus where it came was a lot about fifth graders preparing for sixth grade, eighth graders preparing for ninth grade, sixth graders once they get to the middle school, and ninth graders once they get to the high school. Can we develop more customized solutions in terms of how we look at things? Talked about busing being a challenge. Can it be more consistent with timing? We did talk about transportation and the challenge with timing. I will tell you that that is not an issue, as an aside, just with families of children with IEPs. That's an issue with families with children who receive transportation in the district. Make sure families know what is available to children, which is an interesting discussion and one that we will go deeper with. Work with families in more of a workshop model. Talked a little bit about what does this mean in terms of discussion. And I think that really what it came down to is there an opportunity or possibility for an expansion of that IEP discussion, that annual review discussion in terms of what that looks like. Again, more opportunities for inclusive activities for students in special classes. To examine the discipline of special needs students. As you know, we're in a process right now of looking at our code of conduct. Mrs. Wethington and her role is leading that discussion. Ms. Mallory and the special ed supervisors are involved in that process, but absolutely part of the discussion. More summer reading options for special needs students, which I thought was interesting as well. Continue to work with equity and continue the work of equity and inclusion. Some of the families talked about how they believe their children have benefited, depending upon the programs in which they're in, from very targeted inclusive opportunities that go on during the course of the school day in school. Better balance between academics and mental health. Again, an interesting one. I think we would hear similar things from families of all children. And then to educate this, I included this. This only came up once, but I thought was kind of fascinating to educate staff on what anxiety is, how to recognize it, and how to support students experiencing it, especially with pandemic. And even discussions here at the board meetings. I'm looking at one of our student reps. I know that I think it's something that that they've talked about, in meetings, but just about the prevalence, and the word anxiety is used a lot in schools, and I think something that we can spend more time with. So. Then the final question was, is there anything else that you would like to share? Again, kind of an open-ended one. I will tell you that many of the families by this point, I thought there would be more information. They were kind of done. I think that they included a lot in their suggestions that, anything left to share. A lot of them, were just very positive. No, things have been great, or we're looking forward to a positive year, or I think I've said all about the challenges that, that we've experienced. But this is what we came together in the list. Would like to see case managers, reaching out to families more often. Child and family have had a very positive experience. That came up a lot. And again, I think one of the, for me, and as I talked to some of the board members, some of you, after we had these meetings, again, the level of authenticity and the candor and the absolute openness that people shared about which are very personal experiences and challenges that they've experienced, with their children, with their families, to be willing to share that, knowing that their voice is being heard. And I think that they felt that their voices were being heard, I thought was incredibly important. How can we provide more supports with transitions? Transitions are worrisome for parents, definitely worrisome I would say for parents overall. That is intensified for parents of children with IEPs. To look at HIB, the impact on students with special needs. Would like all processes in the district to move faster, which I thought was a great one. There are some things that absolutely, just can't move faster the way things work, and the structure of where we are. Timely responses, bullying again. What can we do about social skills and more work on social skills with students? Again, the more inclusive opportunities that this came up at this end. This was interesting and different, including social events outside of schools for children with IEPs and their families. And I included this, because it came up in a couple of different ways in a number of the different discussions, and I think does lead into not just the work of the district, but related work, which I'll talk about in a minute with our CPAG, with CESEPTA, with some of those organizations. I think parents are hungry for that and are looking for that opportunity. And again, a place where all families can find resources. So implications and next steps. First, again, I'm incredibly thankful. We thanked the families, and the board members were thankful to the families, when we spoke with them. that we invested this time and got this great information from these 21 families. And you figure 21 families, 21 is about 1%. We're about, Miss Mallory, 2,000, 2,100, 2,200 students, and a little higher, with IEPs, and 504s. So probably a little less than 1% of that population, the families with whom we spoke, in depth. So what comes next? So follow up deeper dive discussions, and this comes in a number of different levels, some of which will be initiated now, some of which will be initiated in the fall. The Office of Special Ed, Office of Curriculum and Instruction, building principals, staff members, the Special Ed Parent Advisory Group, the CPAG, which I think just recently met this week or met last week, and then CHSEPTA, the Cherry Hill Special Ed PTA. We're unique in a lot of ways that we have a special ed PTA that's here. And there are things that, we definitely want to address and involve, each of these different levels in the discussions. And then the development of topic specific goals and corresponding activities for the 22-23 academic year. And these goals that'll be at the building level, they'll be, with our supervisors, they'll be, at that piece, and then we'll continue to report out on during the course of the year. So that's just kind of a nutshell presentation. We will post this presentation online. We'll do updates and we'll talk about, when I meet with Miss Mallory and her team, with Dr. Mahan and Dr. Morton and Mrs. Wethington, we'll talk about updates, because we want to report back out to the board during the course of the year. This won't necessarily appear in the district goals this year, but this is, as we talk about district goals, there are so many things that go on in the school district on a daily basis and yearly basis that are not highlighted. But we'll keep this on as a front burner item, and we'll do report out during the course of the year about, what's taking place. So questions from the board? Sure, Ms. Fleischer.
It's not so much a question, but I just did want to thank you. I also wanted to say how honored I was also with the parents that participated, because like you had said, they were very open and honest with us. And they trusted us, which I truly appreciate. And I want to thank them for sharing their stories with us. And I'm looking forward to even meeting with more parents, because it continues to be one of our board goals, right? So with maybe different student populations
Yes.
So I'm really excited, because I thought it was really a wonderful opportunity to speak with some of the parents and the families.
Yes.
And thank you for your for getting together all the data and input. And I look forward to getting back actually any of the actions that are going to be done based on everything that you heard. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Fleischer. I agree. And that's what we started about and talked a little about in there. Just the time that families were willing to spend and the intimacy that they brought us into their lives, and talked about, and different families, like families that I've never met before, some families that I had met before, but some that I had never met before, which I think is always valuable, because again, it continues to broaden that experience. And I do think that the piece that board members being involved was incredibly valuable this year, and a commitment of time. You figure when we do it, 30 minutes to 60 minutes. So in round numbers, probably 45 minutes for each one of these 21 meetings. Then the time to prep ahead of time, the time to go, to debrief afterwards, that the board members spent, that we spent. It's a significant investment of time, but I think a very valuable or almost invaluable investment of time. So thank you. Aiden.
Hi, I had a couple of thoughts,
Sure.
comments. One, as Jen said, this is great. I hope the district continues to do it. I think it's an important element of, incorporating different people's voices into the process. Two, and I have three things, I guess. Two was, is there any thought or consideration of, especially with the families with younger kids, maybe meeting with these same families again in the future? I think that could be a good opportunity, especially, if there's a goal of taking what was learned in these meetings and turning it into improvements, then, if you have a kid who's in kindergarten right now, you can meet with that same family when they're in third or fourth grade and see, have things improved? Is their experience changing?
Yeah, Aiden, I'll tell you, that's a great suggestion. It's a model that we used in the past. A couple of years when I was meeting with new families to the district, I'd meet with them once, and then once in a school year, and then the following school year, we would reach out and schedule a follow-up meeting. Again, just kind of fascinating to say, So how are things now? You know, you were really excited when you got here. You moved here for the schools. Your, kids are in the schools. How are things now? So excellent suggestion.
Mhm. That's great. And then my third thing, I just wanted to comment on, as you mentioned, I've talked about the anxiety and mental health elements before. I know as it connects to this, I've talked to many students, both as student rep and just as a student myself, who have 504 plans relating to mental health. And so I just wanted to express that, one, I think that's a very important aspect of this. And two, I wanted to connect it to the district goals. I know you said not all this is reflected in the district goals, but looking at the district goals that are coming up, I know we've heard at the last meeting that mental health is an aspect of those goals. And so I think, and I know one part of the mental health part is potential policy changes, taking things to the P&L committee, seeing what changes could be made there. I wanted to share my own experience. So I was diagnosed with anxiety last year when I was 16 years old. And it's been great. I've gotten help with that. I know other people who have had the same experience. But when I got there, they kind of said, well, we probably could have diagnosed this 5-10 years ago. But it wasn't something I knew about. And something mentioned by one of the parents there was, teach teachers how to recognize it, how to help with it. And I think that should be a focus in that element of the district goal with the P&L committee, where, I think the policies and specifically the health curriculum needs to be updated, because something I've talked about before and actually advocated for change with at East before I was student rep is the fact that if you search our curriculum, the Cherry Hill curriculum on the Atlas platform where it's displayed, the term mental health actually isn't in the health and wellness curriculum a single time, nor is the term anxiety and a variety of other things. So that is somewhere that I could see this presentation connecting to the district goals as they are approved, and seeing if there are policy changes that can be made in that area. So not really a question, but just wanted to bring that up.
Thank you, Aiden. Mr. Avadia?
So thank you, Dr. Marsh, for this effort and for this report. I want to say a couple things. So first of all, thank you to you. Thank you to Janet, Mrs. Cohen.
Yes.
Please relate our and it's this is a very different experience as a board member, to really, you're really in many ways in a family's home. I mean, I'm in my car, but through Zoom, the miracle of Zoom, you really get in. And I would say, the families were extremely generous and gracious and candid. And I thought what was interesting was also like they were really focused on improvement, not necessarily for their family, but in general to making a better product, a better experience. And so I was definitely taken by that. You talk to people, people have a variety of ideas. I think this idea of transitions is one that we keep coming back to, right? In curriculum, I think we call it translation or whatever we call it. But, so it appears here as well. I definitely like to see, I think CNI is the appropriate committee for this one, maybe really look at this. And I know that we've talked about it, but I almost think that by itself, it's a good kind of heading to really think about all the pieces of transitions and that whole customer journey. And when I'm thinking of the customer, I'm thinking not only, our student, but, just that family. Student voice, mental health, absolutely. Very important themes, rise to the level of our strategic vision goals. I was also taken by the idea of social opportunities, both for the students, and that, that could mean athletics, that could mean field trips, that could mean experiences, but basically being together. Now, unfortunately, I was unable to make it, but we had some board members who attended the games a few months back, but more of that. And then the workshops. I think the question is, what do we owe everybody? And then what can we, give as opportunities for self-selection? So I know in the past we've talked about workshops and how well they're advertised or attended and parent university, but like what could, given the just all this great feedback, what could we design and what could make sense? And in a certain sense, is there some kind of steering committee that could help steer some of that? And what could that look like? The other thing is, I think, we've talked in the past about, just looking at opportunities in terms of sort of a strategic planning side of it. I know that we do want to, as a board, visit some out of district placements, as part of our continued journey. And then, of course, we do have this explicitly in the goals for next year. So I think it's a continuation, but I think this is really a lot of work, and I think it's very worthwhile, and definitely a privilege, for me personally to be part of it. But I think, for our board, also a good opportunity and model for both continuing this work and then moving on to additional work for next year. So my thanks all around.
Thank you.
All right, administrative reports, we have none. Which will bring us to correspondence. Mrs. Tong.
I was at the food meal distribution last Wednesday. I think we served about 600 meals. Yeah, I think everybody was very happy to have, there was a good vegetables, fruits, and good things to take home. I was very pleased. And Dr. Malaj was there. And many others. I believe that's the Aramark person was there too as well.
Mr. Mayor.
So, taking out along with Ms. Tong's comments, I was fortunate to be there the week before for the free meal distribution. Each of us, I think, comes to the board with some experience, and it hopefully will help us make some decisions and guide the district. I didn't know that my uncanny ability to fold cardboard was going to be one of those skills. But I was put to work. And frankly, it was great to be able to do that because it allowed the Aramark crew and the other our other volunteers, and the Sugars was there as well, to do really what they do best, and then that is to serve the families that were there, all of which were happy. And I can't say enough about how the kind of pride that the Aramark crew showed in what they did and how well they did it. Families were thrilled. I think we also had about 550 or so families come through that day. But just seeing the enthusiasm with which Aramark took that project, the efficiency with which everybody was moved through was wonderful. I think just 2 more weeks. Is that right? 3 more. So hopefully the community, and the word is certainly out, that the community can continue to take advantage of it. But it was really a wonderful couple of hours. Weather could have been a little bit cooler, but we weren't there to be comfortable. We were there to help, and I'm glad to see the team was out there and doing wonderful job.
And actually, Mr. Mayor, including tomorrow, there are 4 more Wednesdays. So it goes through August the 31st. Will be the last day, noon to 2 at High School East in the parking lot. Bring your own reusable bag. And I appreciate the board members that have been out there, the volunteers. Mrs. Fleischer was there the first week. We've had volunteers there, some of our staff members that have been over there doing it. The Aramark people have done such a wonderful job. And the meals are fantastic. Breakfast and lunches, and the fresh fruits and vegetables have been, and they're local, have been fantastic as well. So yeah, thank you. Noon to 2 every Wednesday through August 31st.
Mrs. Fleischer.
2 weeks ago, I attended the Cherry Bowl on Saturday, and it was a 60-second Cherry Bowl. It's always wonderful. We're so lucky to have the swim clubs in our town and so many of our students. And it's just fun for the families and the students, especially the seniors from East and West that are graduating. And it's like a good celebratory way to sort of leave their swimming career, some of them, and a lot of them go on to college or beyond. But it was wonderful to see the community to come together at such a great event.
All right, any additional correspondence? Okay. Seeing none. All right, this will take us to first public comment. Now, for those who may ask themselves, what is first public comment all about? I will tell you. There will be 2 opportunities for public comment this evening. The first public comment session is for board action agenda items only. Board action items only. Items 18 to 20. There will be another public comment section for any topic at the end of the meeting. If you are a student in the district, you may comment on any agenda item or any item at all during the first public comment period, or for that matter, the second, but please identify yourself as a student. If you would like to speak now, please identify the agenda item and clearly state the name and municipality, unless, as previously mentioned, you are a student. We'll alternate between speakers here in the room, those that are online. Each speaker will be given a maximum of 3 minutes to speak. The timer on the screen will indicate the amount of time you have remaining. Cherry Hill is a community that values education, and educational topics often bring out a passionate response. The Cherry Hill Board of Education supports a school climate in which our diversity is a source of strength and all are included. Respect is foundational in how we treat you, how we treat each other, and how we support our administration and staff in their essential work. Please join us in practicing the utmost respect for all. And by convention, I will look hopefully at the audience. And since no one's approaching, I will turn to Dr. Podowitz on the line to start us off.
My name is Jeff Podowitz. I live in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. The number is 21.1, Approval of District Goals, Action Plan under Student Wellness, Major Activities number 2. I question and recommend modification to the specific wording. Assess and support populations with special needs. Then in parentheses, IEP 504 ELL, close parentheses. Modification and substitute disabilities for the term special needs and take out ELL from the parentheses. Reference, the study special needs is an ineffective euphemism. And it was also a study. The authors is Dr. Morton Gernsberger. She was professor of psychology at the University of Wisconsin. This article and study stated, in the modern day, euphemisms are often used intentionally to deceive and manipulate others. Special needs is a euphemism for disabilities. So please remove ELL from those parentheses. EL is not a disability. So remove it parentheses with IEP and 504. The data reported in this article and study, it was a study also, suggests that the term special needs is so ineffective as a euphemism that it becomes more negative than the term it has been replaced. And the term they use, what's become, is a DYSPHEMISM. Can't pronounce the word, I'm sorry. Also, the term special needs is imprecise. Construing disability as special needs enables misconstruing as special rights, which it's not special rights. These are what actually are human rights, civil rights, or disability rights. So as an example, given Section 504 does not legislate special rights. It legislates civil rights and federal protection from discrimination. So please remove the ineffective euphemism, special needs, and replace it with the word disabilities. The study that I was talking about, and it's really in detail, it's a detailed study, is entitled Special Needs and Ineffective Euphemism in Cognitive Research, Principles and Implications, published in 2006, December 19th, online and also in the literature. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will remain on the line with Ann Einhorn.
Ann Einhorn, Cherry Hill, New Jersey. I would just like to, 13.4, I would like to thank the East Musicians on Call Club.
Mrs. Einhorn, it's not an action item for this evening. You can certainly
Oh, it's not?
talk about this in second public comment, but this is for action item, voting items for tonight.
Sorry about that. I missed the boat. Thank you.
Not a problem at all. All right. All right. Well, that will end public comment number 1. So now what you're all waiting for, which is our board work session. And Dr. Root, I'm going to ask you to report for curriculum and instruction this evening.
Okay, so last Monday I was at the Curriculum and Instruction Committee meeting. Rosie Arroyo took most of the notes, and I received notes from Ms. Mallory as well. I wasn't the note taker, so I'm gonna try my best here. So the first thing we did was we talked about the review of standard orders. Mrs. Minjin, Supervisor of Student Services, completed an annual review of district standard orders for nurses. There were no significant changes. Second, we had an update about the health and PE curriculum. Dr. Mahan gave us a wonderful presentation, very concise and straight to the point, discussing some of the suggested standard changes for family life curriculum. There will be some curriculum changes implemented for September 2022, and questions about the changes will be answered at the August 2022 CNI meeting for September. Let me see. All of their curriculum can be found via Rubicon on the district website. Parents are encouraged to reach out with questions or concerns. I'll add, not on my notes, but I'll add that Dr. Mahan did make it pretty clear that a lot of there's not a lot of huge changes in the curriculum. So until the new curriculum is out, parents are encouraged to look at what's already on the Rubicon, because that's the majority of what's already being taught, and there's not a lot of changes. I don't know if you guys want to comment. Okay. The next thing we talked about was policy review. So there are a number of policies. I don't know, do I need to go through each one or not really? No. Okay, so I don't need to go through each policy, but we looked at a number of policies that were just updated. Most of the updates were pretty small. I know that a lot of the policy work a lot of policies have, and this is part of P&L too, we've been updating inclusive language in a lot of stuff. So we've seen a lot of policies coming through for board approval, and a lot of it are pretty minor changes. The final item, or no, there's a few more things. So we talked about a doctoral dissertation survey. So there was a request from a doctoral candidate. So that means somebody working on a PhD typically. So the request has already been approved. The topic is character education practices and their effect on the district. The candidate would like to include students in his survey for research, and this has been approved by the superintendent. In old business, Mrs. Mallory gave an update on summer programs with a focus on credit recovery and academic achievement. High school credit recovery currently has 51 students enrolled using various platforms. There are three major platforms that are used: Apex, Eduseer, and Keystone. All three platforms offer multiple pathways to accessibility. Students can come to the school for in-person support as well through the month of August. For academic enrichment, approximately 245 students and 15 staff are participating across the district. Some examples of enrichment courses are musical theater, back to nature, keyboarding, and guitar class. Are board members allowed to take guitar class? Because that sounds fun. It's nice. It was nice to hear that there's so many activities and opportunities for students to either so this is not on my notes, to either kind of, pick up some credits that they might have been missing. It's great that Mrs. Mallory talked about how the three different systems tend to be have benefits for certain types of credits that students are trying to recover, and it's nice to know that there are options there that can meet diverse needs. So that's excellent. And I was really glad to hear about all of that. New business, is there an update on the SAC program? So that's something that the board will be looking to hear more about and discuss further in the future. Public comment. A parent felt that summer reading and assignments on the website were very easy to navigate. And they suggested it would be great to also see a similar summary or navigation for family life curriculum updates as well. A compliment on middle school family nights and Dr. Mahan's Screencastify presentation. There were also a few comments asking where do students go when they opt out of the family life and what are the options? Also, can the parent night video clip be updated? So I guess I haven't seen it myself. There's part of the parent night within the health curriculum. There's a standard video that's shown that I guess is at this. Did somebody say it was still on VHS? But so it's a little bit dated, and I know that our teams are always looking to improve materials, and so maybe that's something that'll be looked at in the future. But that's all that I have. So if there are any questions or comments or corrections of my reporting, please. Mr. Ovadia.
Dr. Root, I just wanted to clarify. So the students can't opt out, right? It has to be their family members. So parent legal guardian. Okay. And that's unless they're 18. Okay. So there's students with us till 21. So they could opt out on there. Okay.
Right. So the families can opt out of the family and health curriculum, different features. And what the questions were largely about for families that do opt out, what do their kids do during that time? So
Thank you.
anyone else? Back to you, Mr. Ovadia.
All right. We're going to turn to business and facilities with Mr. Mayor.
Unlike Dr. Rude, I did take notes. So any mistakes I make or things that I omit are entirely my fault. So I'll take, we'll get that out of the way first. We had a great meeting last week with the committee, Business and Facilities Committee. We hosted Ted Bridges, who is one of the higher representatives from Aramark. He gave a comprehensive update on where things stand with Aramark, with food services throughout the district, looking back a little bit as to, that as they're coming out, for the most part, coming out of pandemic. And there were a number of highlights that he shared with us. One of which we've talked about a little bit already, the free meal distribution, which Aramark is partnering with us on, that is going through, thank you, Dr. Malash, the 31st of August. I believe, I didn't do the math right before I came here today, but we're probably up to 1,600 or so families total in the 3 weeks, or are we significantly higher than that now?
Yeah, we're definitely over 1,600 in the 3 weeks that we've done it. It's increased each of the weeks, but it was definitely above 500 the first 2 weeks and was above 600 the third week. So definitely over 1,600, probably closer to 17 or a little above.
And the numbers are students served.
Students served, correct?
Yes.
So the program is going very well. I know Aramark is happy with the way it's working, and thankful that we've had some volunteers come out to assist them on Wednesdays. So any of if we have an opportunity to come out any more Wednesdays, Cherry Hill East noon to 2. It's really a great opportunity to lend a hand. Staffing continues to be a challenge. However, it is easing a little bit. They've hired 9 new staff members as of last week. I think they were still waiting on some background checks on a couple to get them onboarded. The majority of those 9 are going to be assigned to elementary schools as they start to normalize the elementary school food service, both for breakfast and for lunch. They're also looking forward to beginning to reintroduce some of that a la carte items that they had not been doing previously during the pandemic. Some things that the students are big fans of, including ice cream. We've, as some of us parents learn as we take a look at the charges that we get, we know just how much ice cream some of our kids are enjoying during those meals. They're also going cashless. So that's going to be a bit of a change, but Aramark feels that they're positioned to be able to handle that. They've already begun to get some information out to parents through the school so that the parents and families aren't shocked on day one and showing up with money. They will be able to accommodate that to a certain level if they need to for a while, but they do feel like they're getting the word out that all of the meal service is going to be cashless going forward. They have multiple channels that they're using right now to get that information out. So more and more families are prepared for that on day one. They're really looking forward to doing some new things, particularly at the secondary school level. So at both high school East and high school West, they're going to be introducing a few new things. One in particular that they're looking forward to doing is kind of they call it an action station, which is going to be something along the lines of finishing mostly prepared meals, but in front of the students as they come through. They're going to be using some technology that allows them to sort of reheat and add some of the materials as though it's being cooked for them right there, giving just a little more excitement, a little more flair, something that I think that the students would really appreciate. It also allows their staff to enjoy what they're doing even a little bit more, and there's no reason why they shouldn't do that. Mr. Bridges was asked whether or not that new program will still allow the students to get in and out of their lunch meals within the time it's allotted, because we know that they have a very limited amount of time, and he's confident that they can do that, understanding that they may have to adjust some of these plans if it turns out that it's taking a little longer than they expect, but they're really looking forward to that. Similarly, they're also adding what sounds kind of like a Subway deli order, where the students can ask for certain things to be placed on sandwiches that'll be made in front of them. I doubt that they're going to have Charles Barkley or any of the other people out there, marketing for them, but that's also a little something that they're looking forward to doing, in addition to adding some theme meals, which will change up adding some different ethnic and cultural meals, such as Italian meals, Asian Day, Latin meals. Again, just something to give a little more variety, and also expose more kids to different sorts of meals and ingredients and things that maybe they haven't had a chance to explore before. So all really good stuff that they're looking forward to. There are some challenges, though. It's most of the update was really very positive, but they're on top of the challenges to the extent they can. The new ban on single-use items, especially styrofoam, continues to be an issue that they struggle with, but are trying to work around. A couple of the big problems. One is cost. That while there are substitute items that Aramark can use, for instance, for things like trays, they're cost prohibitive. The roughly cost changes between the styrofoam trays that are available now or were previously okay to use, and the cheapest non-styrofoam is about 5 times the cost of styrofoam. Now that adds a significant amount to the cost of each meal. There just isn't enough room there in order for them to be able to serve the meals and for us to provide them at the cost that we have. So they're looking at ways to address that. They have a couple of ideas. One that they've used in some schools before is terms sort of they call it a boat. It's basically like a thick paper boat that they use for a single use that the students can place their items on and get back to the table, and it's not going to last a day. And some of these students, it may not last 15 minutes, but they don't have that much more time to eat anyway. So, that should work out at least for a little while. We did say, again, they've hired the 9, but hiring is still a problem for them. On the Aramark website, they are actively trying to engage as many people as possible to apply and help them out, because as they recognize that we're coming out of the pandemic, and in order for them to achieve these goals that they want to achieve, they're going to need staffing as well. So hopefully they're going to be able to make some improvement there. But for the most part, they're positioned well. They've learned a lot through the pandemic, and they're looking forward to a new and sort of renewed excitement in some of the offerings that they have and going forward from there. Overall, a really nice update from Mr. Bridges. Also, Mrs. Sugars provided for us an update on where we stand with ESSER and Fed funds and CARES Act funds. Just a couple of highlights. The CARES Act funds, the original allocation of just over $1 million, almost all of that has been expended, most of it for Chromebooks, laptops, smart boards, and some COVID-related items to ensure that the schools are as safe as they can be through the pandemic. It's good to know that that money wasn't just one-time use. I mean, the Chromebooks, the laptops they're really they're as much a part of what our students need now as backpacks. So that money has been primarily all expended. There is also on the ESSER 2 funds, approximately a little more than $3.7 million was allocated across a number of different larger buckets. The ESSER 2 funds, those were roughly $2.6 million allocated dollars. 847,000 of that remains. The funds there that were expended were used primarily for the HEPA air filters, such as the one in the back of the room here. 1,500 of those were purchased and are throughout the classrooms in the district, together with HVAC controls. The remaining $847,000 is intended to be used for some continued HVAC improvements, which will still need to be done regardless of where things stand with the bond. There was also $163,000 in learning acceleration bucket that was allocated. About 60,000 of that remains to be spent. Most of that was used for different programs to assist both staff and students with credit recovery, STEM, music supplies. Continued courses also will be used for some of that remaining money, along with some parent education. And getting back to some of the earlier comments tonight, there was a relatively small allocation, but still important money. About $57,000 was allocated for mental health through the SAGE Thrive mental health support. Some of that money will be used to help staff identify a little earlier potentially signs of anxiety in students, to give students or staff a heads up on where they can maybe go to get assistance in the future. So we all know that the earlier you catch an issue, regardless of what it is, the better the outcomes tend to be. Those are the highlights with regards to the ESSER funds and the Fed funds. We discussed just one policy, very minor language revision to a policy which has never been implemented with regards to quorums and the doctrine of necessity. Looking around the table today with 5 of us here, it looked like we might get close to that tonight, but we won't. But the policy language didn't change any practical or no practical changes, no substantive changes. Just brought the language in line with the bylaw. There were no public comments. I don't recall discussing old or new business. I'm sure my notes were incomplete, so please supplement if necessary. All good. All right. Any questions? Seeing none. Mr. Ovadia.
I'll make a comment. Boards before us talked a lot about one-to-one technology and getting more technology in the district. So to your point, I just think it's noteworthy that COVID did push that agenda and that capability forward. And so that's money well spent, many, many years. I remember, long before I was on. So anyway, so we've moved that forward nicely. So thanks.
And with great leadership, Mr. Ovadia, by Mr. Plavinsky and his team.
Seeing no further questions, turn it back to Mr. Ovadia.
Okay, I'm going to turn it to myself because of the doctrine of no. But earlier today, I was fortunate enough to join the HR committee meeting. And there's not much I can report. And even if I could, I don't know how competent I would be to do it. So I can tell you this. We are looking, based on Dr. Malash and Mrs. Sugar's suggestion, at a restructure of the administrative team when it comes to buildings and grounds. We have several retirements that have and are happening. And of course, with what we have ahead, really, regardless of the outcome of October 6th, we do need to be in a position to both be streamlined and to also have, great people in place, as we always have. So we're looking at, kind of what that load is and what that looks like. And so mechanically, what will happen is, instead of a director, we'll have an assistant director of operations and facilities. We'll look at that job description next big meeting, right? So August 23rd. But this will streamline it so that that assistant director reports to the other director that will still be in the wheelhouse of Mrs. Sugars, so that really is more flush. So it made a lot of sense. There's, so that's going to move from here, from HR's recommendation to BNF next cycle as well, to just continue that thought. But the job description itself will be coming before that on the 23rd. So we could say all of that. We could also say, all right, so we did a first reading of policy, which is 1648.15, record keeping for healthcare settings in school buildings - COVID-19. And this is really codifying into policy what has been our practice. So this will move from the recommendation here in first reading to P&L committee next. So we won't look at that the 23rd, but the 30th, Mrs. Fleischer and her team will look at it for P&L, which at which point will be a second reading. Okay. Sold. And then the other piece is that, I don't know what we do here. I think later in the agenda, we'll be talking about exciting news for Malberg. So stay tuned. But some very positive news in place there. And so HR was lovely. It was nice to be a guest. And okay. I'll turn it back to myself, and then I will turn it to P&L with Mrs. Fleischer.
Thank you. So P&L met, and the committee approved revisions to the 2023-24 and 2024-25 calendars. They're both on the agenda tonight to be approved. The one thing that I did want to point out to everybody is that from now on, with our districts, Lunar New Year, Eid, Diwali, and Three Kings will always be on our calendar, but if they're not seen on the calendar, it's because they will fall on a weekend. And if they are on the calendar, and there's a possibility it could be a teacher in service, and if any staff member celebrates that holiday, then they can take a PTO day for that day if needed. But it's been very important to the board and to the district to be as inclusive as possible about everybody's cultures. We're hoping to take a step with that. I thought, especially when it came to Eid, Mrs. Wethington and Mrs. Mallory, and Dr. Malash met with the Muslim groups, the Muslim Club and the Muslim Association to talk about, because Eid always is changing based on the lunar cycles. It's not always the same day, and it changes a few months ahead. So it was a wonderful conversation. Dr. Malash, I don't know if you want to say anything about that.
So Ms. Wethington and I went over to High School West and met with the Salam Club, High School West, and then students, an advisor from High School East from their Muslim Student Association joined us via Zoom, I guess. We had a great discussion. Kids were very articulate about their experiences, as students observing Ramadan, what the holiday means to them, what it means to the family. So very well done, presented very well. And when we took it back to the board, the board agreed that was an important day. Moving forward, it'll be a day that students will be off. Some years it'll probably be an in-service day for staff members. Some years it'll be a day that may be closed for staff members.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Malash. Thank you, Ms. Wethington. The next thing on our agenda was the bylaw 0167, public participation in board meetings, which actually comes up for approval tonight because it's on a second reading. But we discussed that Mr. Green had spoken about the fact we had talked previously about student comment and whether or not we had to change a policy to include an additional student comment section. But Mr. Green had looked at the policy and said, at any time we choose, the board can choose to institute a student comment section, but the policy does not need to be changed. Am I right, Mr. Green?
Yes, you are correct.
Okay, thank you. So that's something that is left up to the board. And if it's something that we choose to do on a regular basis or even on a, one-off type of thing, it can be done at any time with just a discussion. And that will be up for second reading tonight. The first readings of policies, you heard some of from the CNI committee and from the BNF committee. And actually also the HR committee, the policy 1648.15 that Mr. Avadia just talked about is going to go for second reading on the next at the next one, our next meeting, or actually, I'm sorry, at the next P&L meeting, it will be talked about. And policies 2415.404 and 2415.5, 2416.0, 2416.01, 2417, and 2432 were originally supposed to be discussed at the CNI meeting, but they're going to be discussed at the August 30th committee meeting. Tonight, we're going to actually have the first readings of policies 1511, which is the Board of Ed website accessibility, 2415, which is Every Student Succeeds Act, 3270, which is the professional responsibilities, and 5722, which is the student journalism. So those will be on the first readings, and then they'll be discussed at their committee meetings going forward for a second reading. Tonight, we also have our second readings of our policies that we have been speaking about for a while. Excuse me. There's a big list of them. It's the bylaw for the board member resignation and removal, 0145, bylaw 0155.1, the board member participation at meetings using electronic devices. And then we have some that were discussed at human resources, P3161, examination for cause teaching staff, P3216, dress and grooming teaching staff, P4161, examination for cause support staff, P4261, dress and grooming support staff. And then there are additional ones up for the second readings, which are P511.2, open enrollment, P5512, harassment, intimidation, and bullying, P7410, maintenance and repair, P8110, attendance areas, P8420, emergency and crisis situations, and P9320, cooperation with law enforcement agencies. Most of these have wording that either Strauss Esme, our policy consultants, either change them to be more in line, like gender neutral is where a lot of these are going, or there was a little bit of an update so that we needed to update them. And if not, like it's something that we've discussed that all of you have heard over the last few meetings. And so one of the things that we talked about is that policy 8420, which is the emergency and crisis situation. Mrs. Arroyo had brought up about the fact that it's actually something that talks about emergency and crisis situations. And she had brought up about the weather being maybe an emergency and crisis situation. We got into a discussion, and Dr. Malash had brought up a great suggestion, and thinking that that actually should be brought up in a different policy. So at our next meeting for P&L on the 30th, we're going to discuss policy 8601, student supervision after school dismissal, regarding identifying a severe weather situation rather than addressing it in the 8420. So we're going to forward 8420 for the second reading, and then we're going to discuss the 8601 to see, just to make sure that the policy does include making sure kids have if there's severe weather, that there's an actual policy of what happens to children and dismissal times and being in the schools. And then the abolishment of policies was something else. There were two. The one thing that actually I learned about the abolishment of policies is that if a policy is abolished, there always has to be a policy to take its place. So some of the policies that we're going to be okaying are actually switching with one of the two of the policies that we're abolishing. And then the last thing for new business, Dr. Malash provided an update on standing orders, use of force for the police department. And Dr. Malash, do you want to mention what that is?
So there was an update that came out from the Attorney General's office earlier in the spring about use of force. Because we have our own police department, the 9 sworn officers that work for us here in Cherry Hill, under the supervision and direction of our Director of Security, Mr. Saporito, we follow the same guidelines that all police departments in the state follow. Mr. Saporito spent quite a bit of time of going through the updates from the Attorney General and focusing them on what impacts us in Cherry Hill, to cut down on the pages. There's a lot of information, that does not impact us. Like there's a section on the use of tasers and things like that. Our officers do not carry tasers, nor will they. So that's not part of it. Car chases, things like that. Our officers are not involved and would not be involved in anything like that. But just talks about the protocols and what has to be done, with the escalation and the use of force by any of the officers, what the reporting looks like, what the follow-up looks like. Again, Mr. Saporito works with Cherry Hill Police Department, Camden County Prosecutor's Office. So all of that is very specifically articulated in the language that's included and based specifically and directly on what the Attorney General requires.
And so that was just an Attorney General update, and there's no action that needed to be taken by us. It was more of an update of
Correct.
information, correct?
Yep.
Thank you so much, Dr. Malash.
Thank you, ma'am.
The next old business. So a board member had asked about, we had been speaking about having the anti-bullying specialist come to the committee meeting, and Mrs. Wethington is planning to have that done in the fall at some point. Then we had also spoken about a policy 5460.1 graduation. That had to do with the graduation times switching back and forth between East and West. And we had talked about it and had actually okayed it, and we just wanted to see where that was. And at this point, we spoke about the fact that we'll use East and West as a starting point this year, where East was AM, West was PM, and that will be the starting point of going back and forth. But Dr. Malash did make the caveat saying that at any time the principals can make their decisions, for any reasons with discussion to change that order. Am I correct in saying that, Dr. Malash?
Yes. Yeah, we would work language in there. So we'll present that, I believe, on August the 30th during the September cycle.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then we had a few comments about different second reading policies that are coming up. And just a question about the dress code. When will it be ready to be reviewed? And there's more discussion and stakeholder engagement that's happening. It has happened in the spring. It's going to continue in the fall, and we'll be talking about it later in the fall. So I think that is everything for P&L. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, Aiden.
I had 2 questions. One, I remember there were public comments advocating for with the calendar, those holidays to actually be written on the calendar. Just wanted to clarify, is that what's happening in the calendar update, or are they just being included but written as in service?
Mrs. Wethington, do you have comment on that?
Depends on the year. Some years the day will be a day that students and staff are off. Some years it may be an in-service day, but students will be off. Every calendar is a little bit different. Some of the days fall on a weekend. Eid in particular rotates pretty significantly from year to year. So it's consistent that each holiday is acknowledged. How we acknowledge it changes year to year.
That makes sense. Thank you. And then my other question was with the student comment period, since that's not necessary to actually change the policy and it could just be instituted at any time. Is there any plan for how the board will continue to discuss that? Is that going to be continue to be considered, since it won't actually have to be on the agenda?
We still are in discussion. I'll actually put it over to Mr. Ovadia for more information.
Yeah, thanks, Aiden. It's kind of a judgment thing. So today, for instance, we opened up and we said students can talk about anything everybody else has to start with agenda items. For today, we did not anticipate a lot of student comment, and we had none. However, if we see a lot of faces who we suspect perhaps are students, it could be just, we pull an audible and we say, look, before we really open up broadly, let's do students, we'll stop students, we'll start public comment 1. But there's got to be a sort of a call at some point about it. So that's my thought right now. But if you look at the last year, we've had some passionate student comments. So it makes sense to kind of do all of that at one time. The other thing is to juggle the presentation load, right? So if we've got like 3 45-minute presentations, it's something we really need to think about, stacking it like that, because then everyone's waiting for public comment. So the other thing we could look at in something like that is to do a special thing, but we can do that by agenda management, I think, versus policy, because policy starts to lock us into a certain road that may not practically be necessary. So that's my thought on it. I don't know if other people, it's not my call, but I usually am responsible for reading the 3 paragraphs each time. So that's my thought, but I don't know if any other board members have thoughts.
I agree with Mr. Avadia. I think the one thing that, and then I'm sorry that I went ahead of my Board of Ed members, but student voice is so important to this board. And that's why, we want to make sure that it's heard. And I think, like what Mr. Avadia said, there were times last year that we had presentations that went on very, very long, and we want you all to be able to have your voice be heard, but also be able to do your homework, right? So I think that it's going to be in the forefront of our mind going forward, I think in the fall. Is there anyone, Mr. Mayor, Mrs. Tong? Mrs. Tong?
Yes. Yes, I just want to possibly my thinking skills put in use. I think we should put the students first, just at any time, so that way they know to come at 6:30 and get the things out of the way, and they can go home and we do our presentations. Otherwise, when we play around, they were sitting here for 6:30 and they're not being able to talk. They'll get frustrated, especially the students. That's my thought. I think that should be the first thing on every meeting.
You want to go?
So, all right. So Mrs. Tong, so your suggestion is before we do roll call, we do pledge of allegiance, we do roll call. And your suggestion is that each time we open it up for students first. But then what about this? So now there'd be 3 public comments. So now you're saying, so they can talk at any of them, but we have a specific session which we open and close.
Yep.
I mean, that's another way to do it. That's not what P&L, I don't think, came up with, but
I
you
guess
continue
it's
to-
more consistency. So when the student comes in, they know they'll finish. If they have to stay for an hour, at least they're out of the way. They don't have to stay here for 3 hours and then they say like, oh my God, when am I going to get my homework done?
Yeah, so we'd kick it back to.
I
Mrs.
was going to
Fleischer.
say, maybe what we can do is bring it back to P&L so we can have a more of a discussion, and then we can bring it back. So is that good?
Yeah, that sounds great. And I, thank you again for considering all this. The only other thing I would advocate, whichever, sort of option is gone with, I know Mr. Avadia mentioned kind of figuring it out once we're in the room, seeing how many students there are. The only thing I would sort of, add to that is if there is any way to let students know in advance, maybe you somehow know that like a bunch of students are planning to come to a meeting, you could announce beforehand that that period will be there, because one aspect of this is students may not only have to go to get their homework done, but they may say, well, I have a swim practice or a club Zoom meeting at 7:30. So if I can be out by 7:30, I'll be there. But then if they don't know until they actually get to the meeting and the board then sort of makes the call on the fly, that may still discourage students from coming. So, as much advanced communication as possible is good. Obviously not possible all the time, but yeah.
Thank you, Aiden. And so we will have more of a discussion again on this in the next P&L meeting on August 30th. Anyone else? Dr. Wu, do you have anything? Mr. Moore? But thank you for that discussion. I appreciate it. Any other questions? No? All right. So I will send it back to Mr. Obadia.
Thank you. And we will go to Mrs. Tong for strategic planning. Strategic planning is the only one we still do in the whole. So with that, turn it over to Mrs. Tong.
I was at the town council meeting at the end of July. Am I correct? The last week of July. There was it was a great turnout. There was a lot of community people were there. The CHEA was there. A lot of administrative people was there as well. And who else? Oh, myself included, right? So I do recommend on that day, October 6th is our voting day. Instead of October 4th, please come out and vote from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. So that's my short speech. Any questions?
Okay, let me, so thank you, Mrs. Tong. So I would just say, we talked about this before, but I think one of the things with town council is the idea of, what are we doing as a board? I think, to be out there and to make sure there's good information. And so I just, I've been thinking about that. I mean, that's something we want to be very serious about. Now we've talked a little bit about doing a town hall. The thought really is that the more we can get information out there and engage, the better, and so what that looks like, we have to be in our respective board role. A lot of people are doing things independently as they do and should. But I think, us having a presence out there, from what I gathered, we went really for the public launch to town council to really deliver this. And I think we just, we need to have an aggressive calendar so people can access us. I know, Dr. Malaj, I have said, we want to meet with people. We want to talk about, what it is and where to find information. We've tried to very carefully curate information over the course of, I don't know, over 3 years, really. And so, there is a lot of nuance that's important. But at the same time, I think, what we delivered was really a 10-minute presentation, top line messaging. I think it was well received. And so there have been some follow-up articles and things, but I think we've been off to a good start. So that's my comment. Mrs. Tom?
Anybody else? Okay. Well, Ms. Silveira, back to you.
All right, that will bring us to the special action agenda. And we will return to Dr. Rude to move the CNI agenda, please.
Don't know if I remember how to do this. The superintendent recommends, let me see. Approve, item 18.1, approval of attendance at conference and workshops for the 2022-2023 school year. 18.2 is just to move that item. So I'll move that item forward. Do I have a second? Mr. Ovadia? And if we can vote. Any questions? Seeing no questions, Ms. Sugars, if you could start the vote.
I have opened up the online voting. Board members, you may cast your votes. We have a unanimous yes vote.
All right, we will move to Mr. Mayor and Business and Facilities to move the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Ovadia. The superintendent recommends that I move the following. Item 19.1, approval of bill lists. Item 19.2, resolution for the award of bids. 19.3, resolution of the award of transportation. And 19.4, action consent to improve business and facilities, items 19.1 and 19.3. Do I have a second? Ms. Fleischer, Mrs. Fleischer, any questions? Seeing none, Mrs. Sugars, would you be so kind as to open the voting?
The voting is open. You may cast your votes. We have a unanimous yes vote.
Thanks. I will be moving the HR agenda. The superintendent recommends and I move the following. 20.1 termination of employment certificated, 20.2 termination of employment non-certificated, 20.3 appointments certificated, 20.4 appointments non-certificated, 20.5 assignment salary change certificated, 20.6 assignment salary change non-certificated, 20.7 other compensation certificated, 20.8 affiliation agreement, 20.9 other motions, 20.10 action consent to approve human resource, 20.1 to 20.9. Do I have a second? Mrs. Tong, any questions? Mrs. Sugars, should you move to the voting?
The online voting is open. You may cast your votes. We have a unanimous yes vote.
We'll turn to Dr. Malash for a moment.
Thank you, Mr. Avadia. I just wanted to point out to the board that in item number 20.3 appointments certificated, you just appointed our newest principal in the district. I'm very excited to introduce Danielle Edwards. Danielle, if you would walk up to the podium. Danielle was just approved to be the new principal at the Malberg Early Childhood Center. So she will join us this fall. Currently, Danielle is an assistant principal in the school district of Philadelphia. She has varied experience in public schools, in charter schools, as a teacher, as a coach, as an early literacy specialist, and she's incredibly excited to come work with our children, our staff members, and our families at the Malberg Early Childhood Center. So I'm thrilled that she is with us this evening. So Danielle, if you want to say a few words and introduce any guests that you brought with you this evening.
Welcome. And we will go to Mrs. Fleischer to move the P&L agenda next.
Thank you. I just want to make sure we do have an addition to the action agenda that I passed out to our board. It's this, just to make sure you knew. The superintendent recommends, and I move the following: 21.1, the 2022-2023 approval of district goals, and 21.2, the approval of harassment, intimidation, bullying hearing decision. Do I have a second? is
Mrs.
there
Fleischer, would
anything
you
else?
read
Oh, you want me to read
21.2, please? Yes,
Sure.
please.
Okay, so 21.2, approval of harassment, intimidation, bullying hearing decision. Resolve that after consideration of the information presented by the parents during the July 26, 2022 HIB appeal and HIB incident number 21-22-18 heard in executive session, the Board of Education hereby reverses the prior HIB determination in this matter pursuant to the board policy and applicable law because in the board's opinion, the incident in question does satisfy the definition of harassment, intimidation, and bullying under board policy and applicable law, and be it further resolved that the board directs the assistant superintendent to provide a copy of the board's decision to the parents of the affected pupil and other involved parties. Thank you. After hearing that, do I have a second for both 21.1 and 21.2? Dr. Root, any questions? Seeing none, Mrs. Sugars, can you open up the voting, please?
We have a unanimous yes vote.
Great. So as has been our custom, we've now approved district goals for next academic year. It actually took a lot. It took months of work, subcommittee, the board, administrative team, and a lot of really good work. But per our per what we usually do, these will be available tomorrow, hopefully on the website. For perusal. And again, just to note, this isn't all we'll be doing. We'll be doing 100 times this, but these are things that we feel after a lot of deliberation and back and forth and good work, I believe, by the board and everyone who was part of this and the administrative team, of course. Sort of a good go forward top line. So my thanks to all involved, that came together to make this happen. And it's nice to have it approved. All right, strategic planning. We have nothing listed, so we're no items this time, which will bring us to new business. Is there any new business to discuss this evening? Is there any old business to discuss this evening? That will bring us to second public comment. This is the second public comment section during which you may comment on any topic. If you would like to speak now, please clearly state your name and municipality. We will alternate between speakers here in the room and those that are online. Each speaker will be given a maximum of 3 minutes to speak. The timer on the screen will indicate the amount of time you have remaining. Cherry Hill is a community that values education, and educational topics often bring out a passionate response. The Cherry Hill Board of Education supports a school climate in which our diversity is a source of strength and all are included. Respect is foundational in how we treat you and how we treat each other and in how we support our administration staff in their essential work. Please join us in practicing the utmost respect for all. And by convention, we will start, by convention, we will start in the room. We will then turn to the line for Dr. Podowitz. Dr. Podowitz, you're still on mute.
Okay, they just unmuted me. Okay, last school board meeting, I commented on a graph on SFRA district profile. My name is Jeff Podowitz. I live in Cherry Hill. I commented on a graph on SFRA district profile, Education Law Center, that for 2014 had on required state aid, that is uncapped aid, of $44,313,864, while we received $12,732,323. This contrasts with data presented on our school district website that our uncapped aid was approximately $29 billion for that year. As for SFRA formula aid breakdown before the cap, 2013 to 2014, equalization aid was $32,747,026. Special ed categorical aid was $8,024,098. Security aid was $1,136,623. Transportation aid was $406,117. Total uncapped aid was $44,313,864. The exact number that was on the education law graph. Numbers that I obtained from the state of New Jersey, from the state of New Jersey Department of Education, Division of Administration and Finance, Office of School Finance, School Board of Administrators, please correct the numbers you have presented numerous times to our community to properly reflect how much we as a community have been cheated by the state under SFRA. In 1 year, it was $30 million. I just confirmed those numbers, not that you care. There is a question for further consideration from the article entitled, "What Can a Conception of Power Do?" Theories and Images of Power in Student Voice Work, from International Journal of Student Voice. Yes, there is one. Volume 2, number 1, 2017, edited by Dinah Mitra, Penn State University. This is the question that was asked, one of the questions in that article. How do you understand the role of student voice in power relations in school? Does student voice challenge, unsettle, and or potentially reinforce?
Thank you, Dr. Podowitz. I gave you a couple extra seconds because there was confusion. I think it was on your end, but nonetheless, we wanted to give you the extra 10 seconds. Thanks for calling in. We will now return in the room. I'm sorry, we'll have our first speaker in the room, and the floor is yours.
Alana Yaris, Cherry Hill. I tried to raise my hand at first public comment, but I was not fast enough because I was doing too many other things while watching this board meeting originally. I just wanted to speak on behalf of my family about how excited we are about a Malberg principal being hired. I know that I'm really excited about the principal, and that my kids that will have her will be excited as well. About discussion earlier from graduation timing and alternating back and forth. I have my kids every 2 years, and if graduation is alternated back and forth for 12 years, for the 6 years that I go to graduation, I will always attend at the same time. So as my preference, I would hope that maybe you look at a every 2-year alternation, every 3-year alternation. I'd like to see a different time of day for graduation when I attend. But that's my own personal feeling on it. You also discussed student public comment. I've attended a lot of different meetings throughout town, in other towns. One thing that they do is public comment on prior registration. I know that in times you have asked students to pre-register if they're going to speak or mention it to you. I think maybe if you see that there is a lot of students that want to speak at a particular meeting, maybe at that point you can say, let's have a student public comment. Otherwise, I think holding to the 2 public comments is fine, offering to students to speak first, but just another fresh idea from a constituent that voted you in. Thank you.
Thank you. We will go, okay, nobody on the line? And therefore, all right, we will close public comment 2. And Dr. Melange? Do you have anything that you can and want to address?
The only follow-up that I have to Dr. Podowitz's comments, the numbers that he's referring to versus the numbers that we put out, looking at the numbers in a different way. Not arguing with the numbers that he comes up with. We are not looking at the same numbers in terms of what we are sharing and the way that we are sharing it. Always happy to have additional discussion with him. I'm sure that Mrs. Sugars and I could sit down with him and go through what it is that he's looking at. If he's interested in doing that, just reach out to us. And there's continued discussion. We'll take a look at the high school graduation piece as well, what that means.
Just final thought, that riddle where you got to get the fox across, and then you got to get the people and then the grain. So for the Yaris family, if you alternate high schools with the children, the math in my head. So anyway, I leave you with that thought to ponder. Fresh idea. So, all right. So I will make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Do I have a second? Mr. Mayor, and all in favor, say aye. Aye. All right. We are adjourned. Have a good evening.